J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
I call this meeting to order.
76 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, November 28, 2023, the committee is commencing its study of subject matter of Supplementary Estimate B 2023-2024. Comme vous le savez, cette salle est munie.
As you are aware, this hall has high-performance audio systems. However, whenever you're speaking, please avoid bringing the earpiece too close to the microphone because this causes interferences and injuries to our interpreters. So please be careful. Let me also remind you that all observations must be directed to the chair. In accordance with our routine motion, since we have participants attending virtually on Zoom, connection tests have been done. At this point, I would like to welcome our witnesses who are here.
Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, PC Minister of Veteran Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defense. With her, we have from the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have Mr. Paul Ledwell, Deputy Minister, Sarah Lenz, Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Services, and by video conference, we have Mr. Stephen Harris, Assistant Deputy Minister, Service Delivery Branch. Donc, Madame la Ministre.
Madam Minister, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. After that, members of the committee will ask you questions. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And thank you to the committee members for the invitation to appear before the committee today to discuss Supplementary Estimates B for my department, Veterans Affairs Canada. I appreciate and welcome these appearances concerning SUP estimates as they allow us to make sure Canada's veterans are being served and supported as efficiently as possible. Comme vous le savez, plus de 90% du budget.
As you know, more than 90% of the Veterans Affairs Canada budget represents payments to veterans for support and services that were hard-earned by those who served in the Canadian Armed Forces and family members who supported them at home. Our government cares deeply about Canada's veterans and their families and continues to make regular investments that aim to maximize their overall well-being after service.
I announced that we hired and we made an investment, of $164.4 million so we can continue to improve the services that veterans and their families count on by retaining more than 600 Veteran Affairs employees for an additional 2-year period. To date, federal investments have supported the hiring of additional case managers and support staff to lower the caseload of frontline service delivery employees and to reduce the volume of disability applications currently in the queue. Cet investissement s'ajoute au
This investment adds to the $156.7 million investment outlined in Budget 2023, bringing the funding up to a total of $321.1 million over 5 years, plus $14.4 million ongoing to support services to veterans and members of the RCMP. It is no secret, Mr. Chair, that the timely and efficient delivery of these services is a top priority for our veterans and an ongoing challenge that we are continually working to address. And that is why the supplementary estimate includes $15 million to modernize IT infrastructure, digitalize paper files, and implement digital technologies to support faster processing times, all of which will make the delivery of services more efficient for our veterans.
Also plan for a $6.9 million increase in the budget for Veterans Review and Appeal Board to continue its efforts to address their backlog. Our estimates also include $5 million for VAC's campaign on mental health and remembrance. For the mental health campaign, funding will be used to promote and to create awareness among the veteran community of services and supports available to them immediately. Through the Remembrance campaign, we will honor the Canadians who served our country during times of war, military, conflict, and peace. The campaign will also play a pivotal role in engaging Canadians in acts of remembrance and recognition of past and present sacrifices. Alors qu'un nombre croissant de vétérans
As a growing number of veterans continue to approach the department for support and services, we are seeing a significant increase in demand for the income replacement benefit and the rehabilitation services and vocational assistance program. The $3.6 million in the estimates will be used to help meet these needs among the veteran community. Demands for legal counsel from the Bureau of Pension Advocates also increased in the past years. This has led to a backlog and longer wait times for veterans to receive the support they need.
The investments in these estimates reflect the priorities identified by veterans themselves and will ensure we are able to meet their needs. Specifically, Mr. Chair, members, the supplementary estimates B add a total of $42.2 million to the Veterans Affairs Canada budget, and I can assure you that this additional funding represents an important and necessary investment in the health and well-being of our veterans and their family. Encore une fois, je vous remercie.
Once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here, and my officials and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Minister, for your remarks.
Our colleague MP Julie Dewowitz, who replaced Caroline Bennett. So now let's start the first round of questions, and I invite MP Blake Richards for 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, Minister. The stories that I hear from veterans that call or write to my office every single day, there's stories that are heartbreaking. And I want to just share a few of those that I've heard recently with you. Sergeant retired Graham Kerr served 4 combat tours in Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and he has fought for years with VAC just to get coverage and treatment for his disabilities. Or Lieutenant Commander retired Dr. Greg Passy, who says that his claims for support took 29 months to adjudicate while he battled with cancer. Or Master Corporal retired Eric Laverne, who was a victim of military sexual trauma and has struggled with PTSD and mental health for years, and told us last week that he has been asking for help, that VAC continues to deny him that help that he's asking for. Or Kent Gulliford, who says that both he and his wife are having incredible difficulties processing claims under the new insurance provider, and there seems to be no recourse available to even complain about the lack of service that they've received. Or Captain retired Robert Dimmer, who had 22 years of service, and he's been fighting with VAC for almost 2 years to receive help for hearing loss. And he says that he believes that VAC is just denying him until he dies rather than help him. And those are his words. So, Minister, I want to ask, does this sound to you like veterans who are satisfied with the services that they receive? Does it sound like veterans who are physically and mentally well to you?
Mais premièrement, Mr. Richards, merci beaucoup pour votre question. Je pense
Thank you for your question. I believe that the testimonies you heard from your constituents are testimonies that I take seriously, and we are constantly seeking to improve the programs and services that are available for our veterans. And that is why I believe it's very important for committees like this one carry out studies and research to hear people who are experiencing situations that are sometimes unacceptable. And in my capacity as Minister for Veteran Affairs, I'll do my part to make sure that we improve the services that are available. As the minister responsible, I will make sure that we improve the services available, and that's a top priority for me and for the department as a whole.
Improve the services that are available. I think the first thing you have to do is set some targets. We talked about this last time you were here. You know, when you're looking at your most recent departmental plan, it lists a number of departmental results indicators. There's 17 of them, actually, and only 6 of those 17 have any targets attached to them. And you can hear why those targets are so important. If you're going to accomplish something, you have to know what you're trying to accomplish and how you're going to accomplish it. And when you hear stories like these heartbreaking stories, and these are just a handful of the ones I've heard, it tells you exactly why that's so important. Veterans need to understand, you need to understand that they're real people, that they have real concerns, and they deserve better than what they've received from this government so far. And so, you know, I really hope that you'll start to take that into consideration when you're setting targets, so that you actually have targets, and stop failing these veterans so badly. I've also heard from Corporal Retired Drew, who is living with a service-related disability, and he's now having to live with his parents because housing expenses have gotten so bad with inflation and cost of living that there's 3 of them, and they still can't even afford to, they barely can afford to make payments on some shelter for themselves. And then you look at veterans food banks across this country, they're reporting that demand for their services has quadrupled in the last 3 years under this Trudeau government. And there's a growing problem of homelessness amongst veterans. And, you know, inflation and the cost of living have gotten so bad in this country that even we're hearing now reports of serving members of our Canadian Armed Forces who are having to live in their cars because they can't afford a place to live. So would you not agree that this is just once more proof that your government has clearly failed at these results indicators, and you failed the veterans that you're supposed to serve?
Well, Mr. Richards, once again, what I'll say to that is that we certainly recognize that the cost of living is impacting Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and our veterans are certainly not excluded from that. Just last week, your government had an opportunity, however, to help support veterans when it comes to housing with rent supports and wraparound services, and unfortunately, your government, your party voted against those supports. So again, I ask you, I think it's really important that our veterans, yes, are our priority, but we have to work together.
Excuse me, Minister. Please address your response to the chair, please. Yeah.
Again, I think it's really important to make sure that we want to better support our veterans, but we have to work together. And when we see a party that is voting against providing services, additional services, support services when it comes to housing, rent subs, and wraparound services to make sure that we set up our veterans for success, I think that I would be a bit ashamed, I guess, if I was the member opposite with respect to that decision that was made.
Frankly, Minister, what we did was vote no confidence in a government that not only has failed all Canadians, but in particular has failed our veterans. Your government has absolutely failed to provide the services and support in any kind of a timely fashion that our veterans deserve. They fought for this country, they served this country, and they deserve far better than they're getting from your government. And that is why we're voting non-confidence in your government, and why I believe veterans have lost any trust or any faith in your government, and they need to see a government that will come in and fix the mess that you've left behind. And we'll certainly be the government that will do just that.
Quickly, 10 seconds, please.
C'est
That's okay. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Wilson Miao for 6 minutes, please. Mr. Miao.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Minister and your team for appearing today. I'd like to leave you some time to respond to the previous question. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for that. I was just going to respond a bit to Mr. Richards' comment with respect to the differences that perhaps of the services that we've provided to veterans over the past 8 years. I think that we have to take a bit a road down history, and if we remember that the previous Conservative government actually slashed 1,000 jobs from Veterans Affairs Canada. We can't forget that. Those are direct jobs that provided services, direct services to our veterans. That's a fact. We also can't forget that the previous government closed 9 Veterans Affairs offices across this country. Offices, again, that provided crucial services to our veterans. And I believe even in Surrey, we reopened that office. So I think it's quite rich coming from the party opposite when they're trying to say that we are not providing additional services to veterans veterans. We can always do better. And I think that as parliamentarians, we do always want to do better when it comes to our veterans. But we have no lessons to take from the Conservative Party of Canada. The other thing as well that I am going to add, since we formed government, we have added an additional $11 billion in direct supports to veterans in the past 8 years. That's a significant amount of money. And again, our veterans deserve all the services that we've put in place. We've listened to them, and we want to make sure that they have access to those services. And we will continue to be there to support our veterans. But again, I think if we look at both the differences that both governments have made, I think that we've seen that this government has made significant investments to our veterans. And again, they deserve every investment that we've made.
Well, thank you, Minister, for sharing that with the committee. And through the chair, for Minister, I think we are all quite disappointed to see Conservative voting in the House last week on the supplementary estimate. And these are measures that are essential to supporting Canadians from coast to coast to coast, whether it's funding you mentioned earlier on supporting construction on new affordable housing, or even the brand new 988 mental health crisis line. And I have to say, though, I'm quite shocked the fact that in this committee, Conservative also voted against funding to the Veterans Appeal and Review Board. So, Minister, can you share with us, with this committee, what those funds are used for, and how did you react to this vote from the Conservative Party?
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you for that question. I think that last week we saw 120 votes that happened in the House of Commons, and I was disappointed when I saw the votes when it came to the funding and the investments that we're making for Veterans Affairs Canada. Again, these are estimates, these are monies that have been budgeted to make sure that we can provide the help and support to veterans and those that are in need. When we look at voting against investments to help in the housing front, just as Mr. Richards has indicated, we certainly recognize that many individuals are dealing with affordability challenges. And as a government, we're moving forward with programs because we want to make sure that we're able to be there to help them. Rent subsidies, but also, importantly, wraparound services to make sure that we can set up our veterans for success. We want to make sure that they receive the services, let it be mental health, let it be substance use and addictions, whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that not only are they going to have housing, but they're going to have access, to the supports that they need. That I was disappointed when I saw that. When we look at VRAB as well, the appeal board, we certainly recognize that they're dealing with the backlog as well. They've asked us for more funding to make sure that they can get through that appeal process quicker. Again, these are valuable and important services for our veterans, and we want to be there for them. So again, you ask, how did I feel? I was disappointed when I saw the results of that vote last week.
Well, thank you, Minister, for sharing that. Regarding on the backlog, especially on the disability benefit claim, in the recent report of the Office of Veteran Ombudsperson, she does acknowledge the significant progress realized towards eliminating the backlogs of disability claim. That said, there remains a portion of a backlog yet to be cleared right now. Can you provide an update regarding on the progress to eliminate those backlogs?
Once again, very good question. We still have work to do, but we've made some progress. Last month, we announced an investment of about $162 or $63 million to help us continue to recruit people to process the files. We know that there's still work to be done because we want to attain our magic number. But once again, we must continue to make sure that resources are available to help us deal with the backlog.
Much for that. Do I have some more time? 1 minute. Great. So, Minister, as you know, we are currently conducting an extensive study on women veterans here at ACVA. And we have heard from lots of witnesses about the challenges that women veterans face once they have left Canadian Armed Forces. Equipment affect their bodies differently, the type of condition they report, and the frequency are unique. And they have oftentimes faced barrier and unconscious bias throughout their career. These factors means that their requests need to be processed differently. Can you speak to us about what work is being done to reduce the gap in processing time between men and women veterans, particularly regarding on disability benefits?
Well,
15 seconds, please.
We'll have to come back to that one
Yeah.
for sure. But I can tell you I've been following the work that the committee has been doing with respect to women's veterans. And there's a lot of stories and testimonies that I've heard that are very, very disturbing. And we certainly recognize that a lot of work needs to be done in order to make sure that we can proper address the needs of our women veterans. And again, I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity to continue with this response because c'est bon.
Et maintenant, j'aimerais inviter Monsieur.
Now I would like to call on Mr. Luc Desile for the next 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Minister. I'm delighted to see you here. I'm sincere. You know that. Even though we're talking about the topic we don't really like, and this has to do with the budget, we now have evidence that the Prime Minister's office was involved with the Privy Council Office, Heritage and Veteran Affairs. That was in May. And in July, a request was made to find out whether progress was being made. We saw that in the 400-page document. In your opinion, is that true? I did not really understand your question. We were trying to find out to what extent the Prime Minister or his office was involved. We received 2 pieces of evidence. The Prime Minister had been interested and had sent an email finding out whether the file was moving forward. Are you aware of that? I think we must recognize that the decision concerning the monument was taken by the Minister of Veteran Affairs, and we informed the Office of the Prime Minister that the decision had been made. Now, why was the Prime Minister interested in that? First of all, the decision was taken by the Department of Veteran Affairs. Maybe the process was not totally followed. We wanted to make sure that the Office of the Prime Minister be aware of the decision that had been taken by the department. But the Department of Veteran Affairs, is it not autonomous? Should it be reporting to something that has to do with a $3 billion budget? Mr. Desile, I think that the decision to develop and set up the monument was a decision that was taken not only by the Department of Veteran Affairs, but in consultation with Canadian Heritage. The final decision was taken by the Department of Veteran Affairs. That's it. Madam Minister, when was the decision made? Once again, as I said on several occasions, the process that was followed, the questionnaire, the survey, listening to our veterans, all that was very important. And the opinion of veterans was very clear about the monument. They chose the Simpson concept because, once again, they said that concept represented for them the bravery and sacrifices of the men and women who had served. Mr. Desile, you have to direct your questions to the chair. I forgot. The survey we mentioned was very quickly set aside. Now, Veteran Affairs is using that survey to justify the decision taken by the government on the back of veterans who responded to a useless survey. Can you tell me if one single woman responded to that survey? We do not have information about that. Can you tell me whether one person who attempted to answer the survey twice? I think during my last appearance here, I explained that a message was sent using my VAC account to make sure that veterans were aware of the questionnaire or survey that was intended to seek the opinion of veterans. And that is why we received 12,000 responses to that survey. Madam Minister, there was an interview with Madame Abo, and I sent it to you. I think you received a call yesterday. In that interview, she said if 10,000 veterans had responded something which she found unacceptable, that was not the case. There were veterans, family members. It was not a valid or good survey. People could have responded more than once. We don't know who responded, how the responses were validated. Madam Abo said there were 10,000, but there are more than 400,000 veterans. So you are claiming that 10,000 responses will correspond to the opinion of all veterans? What I can tell you, Mr. Desile, is that such exercises like questionnaires or surveys for a monument, from what the officials are telling me, 10,000 responses is really a high number. Question. So bring them. We need to provide them training through the Quebec survey firm. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? A minute and a half. Go through me. Remember that. In the department's document, we are told that the ministers have the duty to keep the trust of people and ensure the impartial professional nature of the federal public service. I apologize to the interpreters. Mr. Chair, I have a motion to table, a notice of motion. You can go ahead. You have the floor, Mr. Desile. That within that pursuant to this, that as part of his study, the committee called the following testimonies for them to testify by the 13th of February 2024 for 1 hour each. Madam Katsi Telford, Chief of Cabinet, Prime Minister's Office; John Hannenford, Clerk, Privy Council Office; Nathalie Gilles Drouin, Deputy Clerk, Privy Council. And then for 2 hours, we are asking that Mr. Pablo Rodriguez, former Minister of Canadian Heritage and former Minister of Veteran Affairs, appear for 2 hours in total, that the committee add additional sessions to its regular time to respect this notice of motion, taking into account additional resources for this session to be held. So this is a notice of motion. Thank you very much. You still have a minute left, Mr. Desile. Thank you for your notice of motion, which the interpreters did not have. Madam Minister, I am an eternal optimist, but I would have liked to hear you dissociate yourself from this project in honor of our veterans. Right now, the project is tarnishing the image of veterans. You are associating veterans to this wonderful project, which is supposed to be a monument that is there for 100 years. I'm afraid that we'll be talking about this monument as being the monument of shame or the monument of discord. So I would like to conclude by asking you a small question. Do you have a plan to get out of this crisis? Because MPs are talking about 2 monuments. Mr. Desile, it's the contrary. The veterans that I have met throughout the country are telling me that they look forward to seeing this monument built, and they can't wait to see the official revelation of this monument. A small comment. You talked about a number that Madam Abu mentioned. Let's not forget that the 40,000 veterans who participated in a mission in Afghanistan, there were 40,000. So we are talking about a percentage. Let's compare apples to apples. Thank you, Madam Minister. Are you talking about George Apple? Let me clarify.
The last, for this first round, we're going to close with the intervention of MP Rachel Blenay for 6 minutes, please.
Oh, I have to go. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And of course, thank you to the Minister and your team that is here with us today for being here with us. So my first question through the chair is that I did recently submit an order paper question to Veterans Affairs asking about appointments that both the minister and the deputy minister have taken concerning specifically veterans who are women, Indigenous, members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community, or persons living with disability. Rather than getting an answer, I received a response saying that it was just simply too difficult to track. So for the sake of transparency and to make sure that we're seeing the minister's leadership support marginalized veterans, I'm just wondering if there would be the possibility to table with this committee the list of appointments you and your deputy minister have taken since you became minister.
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So the next question that I have is on the reoccurring issue that veterans have raised repeatedly around the fact that so many of them are still struggling to find a permanent home or have serious housing insecurity. And we've heard really clearly as well through the study on women veterans that we've been having lately that women are really challenged to feel safe in some of their living spaces. So I'm just wondering, is there any consideration at your level around having veterans housing that is women only?
So as you're probably aware, we've made a recent funding announcement when it comes to veterans homelessness, and we've received a number of applications that are actually being assessed and evaluated right now with the Department of Infrastructure and also our department. And certainly the issue of women's housing is an area that I think is a great priority. It's needed, and through your study that you've done over the past number of weeks, I certainly have recognized that that topic has come up as well. And I am certainly committed and looking into that. We certainly recognize that $80 million for the funding, or almost that, is certainly not going to address the entire issue, but I think we can certainly make some progress in that area. I think also as well making sure that when it comes to rent subs, sometimes it's making sure that women can choose where they want to live, and that subsidy will help them pay that rent, that extra, so that will go a long ways as well. And again, making sure that those wraparound services are appropriate, and again, trauma-informed in some areas where they need to be. So all of that will be taken into consideration depending on the applicants that we've received as well. And again, I want to just share for the committee, the applications are closed and that those applications are being processed right now or evaluated. And I'm really hoping in the very, very near future that we'll be able to be making some funding announcements regarding some projects.
Well, thank you for that, and I certainly hope to see some focus on women-only centers. We know, and we've heard repeatedly, that this seems to be a significant gap in the services. You know, the other factor that we've heard repeatedly from women veterans is that they feel invisible, and it's particular around health concerns not being properly recorded while they were serving in the CAF. Often these women were silenced, they were bullied to not speak up, they were ignored. We heard of women who were raped and there was no rape kit offered. And often women were just standing the line because they had fought so hard to get there that they didn't want to see their service diminished in that way. So I'm just wondering, how will the minister address this reality in terms of the work at VAC? Because women often do not have the appropriate documentation to support the significant physical, mental health needs that they have because of the lack of records from CAF. And I'm just wondering, is there any discussions happening at a ministerial level to, number one, start addressing this more, and number two, to offer an official apology to the women who serve so that that can be recognized in the public of Canada?
It's an excellent question, Ms. Blaney, through the chair. Again, I've been following the study that you've done very, very closely because it's an area that's near and dear to my heart, having been a social worker prior to entering politics. And the stories and the testimonies that I heard at this committee are heart-wrenching. You know, they were tough. They were hard to hear, but they needed to be heard, and they need to be to be heard. If we want to do better, we have to know what's going on. We have to know what's going on the ground in order to put better policies in place. Being a minister now for the past 4 months, the file when it comes to women's veterans is of great interest to me. All of the files are of great interest, but I've got a keen interest on this one. And one of the first things that I've done is to ask my staff, and this is probably not even public knowledge yet, but I am going to be putting in place a Women's Advisory Ministerial Committee to really look at women's issues. I think that we recognize that women are 51% of the population, and I think that getting their input with respect to what is needed will certainly better inform the decisions that I make as a minister. So we are in the process right now of looking at the terms of reference, the mandate of this committee, and the membership of this committee. But again, I'm looking forward in the very near future, in the new year, that is a concrete step that I'm taking, and again, wanting to hear from veterans themselves to see what what is working and what is not working. The other thing as well that I really want to make sure that when female veterans or all veterans are contacting Veterans Affairs, that they're treated with empathy and professionalism as well. And again, I know that we've heard some stories here at committee that were tough to hear. And I certainly want to make sure that our veterans receive, the best care and service possible. So looking at those types of policies, what can be done to ameliorate, to help the situation, to better the situation, is an absolutely a priority of mine. And finally, the last comment that I'm going to make is with respect to GBA+. I think when we look at gender-based analysis, it's not just a word, it's not just ticking of a box. We really have to look at all of our policies that we put in place and to really do that analysis. How does this impact women? Because we all recognize that different policies can affect, men or women or different genders differently. So we have to make sure that we take the appropriate time to put that lens with respect to the policies. And that includes physical injuries as well as mental health injuries. I think we have a lot of work that needs to be done in that area, and I am committed to doing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now let's go to the second round of questions. And I invite Mr. Blake Richards for 5 minutes, please.
Minister, do injured veterans that are seeking appeal of a disability benefit decision have a right to retain independent legal counsel or advice before Veterans Affairs or the Veterans Review and Appeal Board?
If an individual goes before the VRAB, and if they cannot afford a lawyer, they are able to have a lawyer that is paid for by the department. If they choose that they want to hire their own lawyer, they are able to do so.
Okay, so if a veteran chooses to hire an independent legal counsel, they have the right to do so, is what you're telling us.
Absolutely.
So interestingly, there's a veteran
Absolutely.
in federal court because she believes she's been told that that's not in fact the case. So perhaps, that can be settled very quickly, I hope. But I think the very fact that veterans even feel the need to want to hire independent legal counsel to be able to navigate the complex and bureaucratic processes in VAC is more proof that your government is failing our veterans. These are people who serve this country, and they go to this department for help. They're asking your government for help. And they're finding the process is so complicated and convoluted and lengthy that they don't even feel that they can navigate them by themselves. They feel they need to go and hire a lawyer to do it. Does that not tell you there's something wrong?
Encore une fois, Monsieur Richards, je pense.
Once again, Mr. Richards, I'm constantly thinking about improving our services. That is why we are making sure that we take all necessary measures to improve. At the same time, we have seen historic investments being made, which we continue to do to support our veterans. We can always improve our services, and it's exactly what we'll continue to do.
So, every time, whether it be yourself or your predecessor, it's always the same answer. Well, we're trying to do better. We're not doing very well right now, but we're trying to do better. And it happens every single time. At some point, you have to be accountable to actually do better. And I don't think you can measure it. You've talked about how many people you've hired. You've talked about all the announcements you've made and haven't delivered on. You've talked about how much money you've spent. But veterans want to see results. That's all they care about. All the rest of it doesn't matter. It's what are the results? And frankly, every single day I hear from veterans who are finding it's taking not months, but in many cases measured in years is the amount of time it takes to get any kind of decision. And, they have to go all the way through a whole set of appeals processes, and many of them feel like giving up because it's just that complicated. So I really hope you're going to reflect, and maybe next time you come back, you can actually tell us about some results rather than, we think we're going to try to do better next time. Like, we need results. That's what veterans expect.
Well, Mr. Chair,
I think let's look at another of your departmental results indicators. Another one of your indicators is veterans are able to adapt, manage, and cope with post-service life. Yet I hear from veterans like Petty Officer Second Class Wade Ritchie, who happens to be a constituent of mine, and he says that his transition to civilian life was held up and complicated by the fact he was being left to his own devices because he was having so much trouble navigating the bureaucratic maze that is both VAC and the PCVRS situation, and his own case manager won't even get back to him to try and help him navigate that. Or Doug Cromrie, who reached out on behalf of one of his former soldiers who was diagnosed with PTSD while he was in the military, but then had to fight to try to reprove that condition to VAC when he left the military. And then he was denied the support he needed. Even though in the military he was diagnosed with it, VAC didn't recognize it, and he couldn't seem to convince VAC that the condition the military told him he had existed. Or Nicole Murillo, who is one of many veterans who can't find a family doctor and therefore can't get prescriptions or referrals that she needs for the VAC programs. I just can't stress enough that we hear from dozens of veterans every single week who've lost access to services that they once had due to VAC's sloppy transition to this new service provider. So how can our veterans thrive post-service when they suddenly lose their benefits and supports, or when they can't even get them to begin with?
Encore une fois, Monsieur Richard, comme
Once again, Mr. Richards, as I said before, we are constantly seeking ways of improving our programs. That's why we continue investing. We have recruited additional staff to process files more rapidly. Once again, I'm asking you to really think about your reasons for not supporting additional resources as you did last week. It's a shame.
Time again from you and your predecessors, we're going to try and do better. But when are you going to actually deliver results? It's time for some results, and veterans deserve better than what they're getting from your government.
Mr. Richards, with respect to doing better, I think we have to look at the facts. 61% of when it comes to Veterans Affairs Canada, we have seen a 61% increase in applications at Veterans Affairs Canada. Since 2015, we've invested more than $11 billion in additional support for veterans. So we continue to make sure that more services are provided to them and more applications are coming in. We are always going to be there to help support our veterans.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Seeing better from you.
And time is over, so I'd like to invite MP Sean Casey for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Madam Minister, thanks for being here and for accepting the invitation to come before us so promptly to talk about the estimates. And I'm actually going to ask you about the estimates. Mr. Richards talked about some heartbreaking stories, including one where a veteran had a matter that took 29 months to adjudicate. In the estimates that were voted on the other night, there was one item there for the funding of, for service excellence to veterans by reducing backlogs and improving service, $8.3 million. The Conservatives voted against that particular measure. If the Conservatives had been successful in defeating that allocation, if there were enough votes for them to get their way, what impact would it have on people like the veteran Mr. Richards referred to that had to wait 29 months?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for that question, Sean. Again, the main estimates and the budget's requests that we've made are as a direct result of making sure that we can better serve our veterans, our client base. And as a result, one area that we certainly recognize that there was a backlog is, the appeal board. And as such, that is why that we have been successful in receiving additional funding. What would that mean? It would mean that veterans would have to wait even longer to get their decisions. And again, that creates significant anxiety and distress among victims around veterans. So we want to make sure, again, that we're doing things in a timely fashion. We have to make sure that the resources are in place. And fortunately, we've been able to receive that additional funding because it will make a huge difference with respect to addressing that backlog at VRAB.
Okay, I want to come back to the appeal board again, because another case that was referenced by Mr. Richards was that he's hearing stories from veterans who have been repeatedly denied, including one with a hearing loss fight with Veterans Affairs. And as you rightly pointed out, the Department of Veterans Affairs actually pays lawyers to fight with the department on behalf of veterans, the Bureau of Pensions Advocates. Now, when it came time to vote on estimates to allot some additional funds for the Bureau of Pensions Advocates to provide veterans with lawyers to fight against the department to get them what they felt they were entitled to. The Conservatives voted against that. If they had got their way, if they were able to block that additional expenditure, what impact would that have on people, on veterans coming before Veterans Affairs to get what they felt they were rightly entitled?
We would be talking about more delays, more delays, and more delays. We want to make sure that veterans have access to the legal counsel that they need in a timely manner, and we want to make sure, more importantly, that their file is properly assessed. And again, if we would have not been successful in receiving that additional funding, who is going to suffer in all that is our veterans. At the end of the day, we want to be there for veterans and to make sure that they have the services that they need.
And finally, the income replacement benefit and rehabilitation services and vocational assistance program was another vote that we had in that all-night voting session. And the Conservatives again voted against that. If they had got their way, if they had got, excuse me, if they had got their way and they were able to block that additional allocation for the vocational assistance program and income replacement benefits and rehabilitation services, what would be the impact on veterans?
Blocking that funding would again affect the basic needs of our veterans, you know, the basic needs that they need to survive. So once again, we wanted to make sure that we had the appropriate amount of money that was going to be available to properly support our veterans. And that again is why that I was very disappointed to see that the Conservative Party of Canada did not support those investments.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Kessy. And nous allons avoir deux courtes interventions.
We'll have two short interventions, and I'll be calling on Mr. Luc Desilets for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. There was a meeting at the end of May, beginning of June 2022, with what was referred to as the Quatuor, Veteran Affairs, Canadian Heritage, another department, and the Prime Minister's office. Mr. Ludwell, were you the one who was present, or Mr. Thompson, at that meeting? I was the one who was present, representing the department, amongst other people, amongst others. Don't you have anything to tell us about that meeting? Don't you have anything to tell us about that? Mr. Chair, this was a shared file, a file that was shared between two departments, our department and our friends from Canadian Heritage. It's always a good idea to have a good focus on important files, and that was the objective of that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Ledwell. In the 400-page document that we received, we saw that people from the Department of Veteran Affairs and Canadian Heritage did not agree that the project should be changed. They agreed with the fact that the contract should be awarded to DAO at that time. Do you agree with me? Not exactly, Mr. Chair. At that time, the idea was to look for ways to respond to some issues that had been raised during the process. So that was the goal, to find out the highlights and the process that we had to follow. Because in the document, we clearly say that the two departments were in favor. They were not in favor of change when it came to the choice of the jury. Am I mistaken? Maybe. Well, I do not recall that the discussions were about finding out the highlights, the important perspective, and for those of us at Veteran Affairs, it was about the objective and the request. Mr. Ledwell, as a senior official, were you in favor of the fact that the government should change the choice of the jury? Yes or no? I am not the one who was the decision maker. It was all about finding the best way of responding to the needs and the requests coming from veterans. Thank you very much, Mr. Disile. Thank you, Mr. Ledwell.
I'd like to invite Ms. Bliney, please.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. My next question for the Minister is around the Merlo-Davidson compensation. We know that the Veterans Ombudsman voiced some significant concern about the Minister and the Department not implementing its recommendation to publish VAC's methodology for determining the compensation and to cease disability pension reductions or clawbacks for the claimants at level 3 to 6. And to issue corrective payments to the women from whom pension amounts have been clawed back. So my question on this issue is, when is this going to be implemented? And does the Minister recognize the harm that is being done to these women by having their disability pensions clawed back?
So I've met with the ombudsperson as well, and we've certainly discussed a number of issues, and this being one of them. I think that you've all received her report as well that she's tabled last week or 2 weeks ago. And again, we certainly accept the recommendations that she's made. With respect to where we are at and all that, I'm going to pass it over to my deputy just for a bit more clarity.
If you'll permit, Mr. Chair, that has been responded to, and those payments have been corrected to those women as part of the Merlo-Davidson. And in fact, the Minister has recently received a letter from the Ombud just underlining, confirming the appreciation of the attention on this file.
So I'm just wondering, because a lot of RCMP veterans did not put forward their claims or did not share their claims because they were worried about the ramifications. So has there been any communications gone out to RCMP veterans to alert them that this work has been completed, or will there be?
We have engaged with RCMP women veterans groups and the leadership in that, and have encouraged that communication to go out within that network, invited others to come forward. So certainly have encouraged that. We've not seen any come forward to this point.
Thank you for that. I'm also wondering, what is the current status on the King's Coronation Medal? Medals are usually introduced with the design and criteria established, but since the PM announced the medal in the spring, there's been no further information, news, design, or criteria. So I'm just curious, where does the medal stand at this point, and how many veterans will be included in the process?
So again, very good question. I had a meeting that item came up just last week, and I'm going to be following up with the Governor General's office as well, just because they play a key role in that. So as soon as I have information, I'll be more than happy to share that as well with the committee.
Thank you very much. And now we have two last interventions of 5 minutes each. And I invite Mr. Fraser-Tolmie for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today. And Chair, through you to the Minister. Minister, have you ever bought a house?
Oui, j'ai déjà acheté une maison.
Yes, I have.
Did you pay for it?
J'ai pas la somme exacte.
I don't have the exact amount.
Pay for your house. Did you buy a car? Have you ever bought a car?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Through
point
you.
of order.
Excuse me, I have a point of order.
Well, it's relevant.
With respect, that's not the member's business.
Please, Mr. Tolmie.
Then, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't have confidence in someone who paid for a house more than once, or twice, or a car more than once or twice. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information here. According to their 2022-2023 annual report, the Veterans Review and Appeal Board says that 94% of their hearings are for cases concerning hearing loss and tinnitus, and that over 90% of these cases are adjudicated favorably in funding and support for these veterans. This corroborates what many veterans have been sharing with us, which is VAC acts more like an insurance company denying veterans claims. Why not approve these claims in the first place and reduce times and reduce stress on veterans?
Premièrement, je peux vous dire, je suis complètement.
First of all, I totally agree with you. Since I took over my duties as Minister for Veteran Affairs, I've been lucky to meet with several veterans as well as people working on that file. I think that there's truly work to be done to make sure that we find a solution that is efficient given the resources we have, particularly given those conditions. I think there's work to be done. And lastly, the two departments are working together on that.
I think that being efficient would be to approve their claims the first time round. Would you not agree?
Encore une fois, comme je l'ai bien dit, nous sommes
Once again, as I said before, we are working on those specific conditions to find efficiencies. Once again, I agree with you.
Again, I'm very perplexed because Veterans Affairs has just recently taken a victory lap for resolving the backlog, but review and appeals board caseloads have skyrocketed. The minister, you've said that more money is being invested in clearing the backlog. The backlog has been created because of denials of approval. You're spending more money on a problem that you've created. This is like buying a house more than once, buying a car more than once. Would you not agree?
I think what you're forgetting right now as well is that we have received 61% more applications at the department because of additional investments that we've made for direct services for veterans. That is it is also contributing to the backlog.
But you're denying them. You're denying the initial claims when they come to you.
Encore une fois, comme je dis,
Once again, as I said before, when you talk about certain conditions, there's work to be done. I agree with you. Applications could be approved a lot more quickly.
The backlog by simply denying veterans' claims that they were ultimately entitled to.
Je comprends pas votre question.
I don't understand your question.
Well, it's quite simple. Did you clear the backlog by simply denying veterans' claims that they were ultimately entitled to?
Absolument pas.
Not at all.
A backlog.
Mais encore une fois, as I've
Once again,
we have a 61% increase in our applications at Veterans Affairs Canada.
Sorry, through you, Chair, that's not the backlog. That's an initial veteran coming to you and saying, I need help. That number may have increased, but that doesn't mean that the backlog should increase. If you're going to accept veterans and say that they've got hearing loss and then they've got to go through the process more than once, you're creating that backlog.
As I've indicated, with respect to hearing and tinnitus, I agree that we have to find efficiencies in making sure that those files are handled way more efficiently, and that's exactly what the department is doing in making sure that
through
we
you,
can.
Chair, I mean, this should be done. This is something that's not gone away. We've been hearing this I've been in this chair for 2 years. I've been hearing this for 2 years. Nothing has improved. And
actually, I am doing something about it.
Through you, Chair, I'd like to hear what that is, because I know that veterans would like to hear what that is.
Again, as I've indicated, we are working on exactly that specific issue, making sure that we can find those efficiencies and deal with those files as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Tolmi. And the last intervention with Mr. Randeep Sarai. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for coming here. One thing we've seen in from my short time here in this committee is that some of the scars and of battle that veterans carry are visible, but others are not. And those invisible scars, of course, manifest themselves through occupational stress injuries, which have significant impact on a veteran's quality of life. Can you speak to us about this and how Veterans Affairs is working to improve the mental health supports it offers veterans?
Yeah. Thanks so much for that question. I think that we all recognize that mental health and physical health is health, and we have to make sure that that our veterans have access to the service that they need in a timely manner. We can call it operational stress injury, we can call it moral injury, we can call it PTSI. I think first and foremost, we have to first of all deal with the stigma that sometimes is still attached when it comes to mental health injuries. We're doing a better job, but again, I think more work can be done in ensuring ensuring that people have access and ask for the services that they need when they need them. As a department, we've heard loud and clear, and I think that recommendation was perhaps even brought up here at the VAT committee, that we have to again find efficiencies in making sure that people have access to mental health services in a timely fashion. And instead of contacting Veterans Affairs Canada and going through an application process and it taking some time, we've made sure that when people are accessing or asking for mental health services, that those approvals are done immediately. Because again, when people are asking for help, we have to make sure that they don't have to wait for the services. And through the department, I think that we've been very effective and efficient in making sure that our veterans do have access to those services in a very timely fashion.
Thank you, Minister. Also, when it comes to homelessness, it's on the rise in many cases in Canada, no different in Surrey. It's a reality that's facing too many veterans who have bravely served our country. And obviously, everyone deserves to have a safe and affordable home. So it's vitally important that we do everything in our power to kind of help and assist homeless veterans. They fought bravely for our country, and we deserve, and they deserve a safe and affordable place to call home. I know the Government of Canada launched a dedicated veteran homelessness program. Can you tell us what action the government is taking on this critical issue?
Well, with respect to different types of programs, the latest program that we announced, there was a call for proposals this year. And again, we've received a number of applications from different groups across the country. And as indicated, the Department of Infrastructure and Veterans Affairs is in the process of reviewing those applications. And I'm certainly hoping that we'll be able to make some announcements in the very, very near future. Again, the monies, the investments for those programs, we are really talking about two tranches, if you will. One part of the funding will be utilized for rent subs because we, again, want to make sure that veterans will have that supplement to pay for their rent. And also in some areas, we want to ensure that the wraparound services, if some are needed, are also available there. So I'm looking forward. I've seen some of the preliminary applications that have come in. And again, we have some groups that have been working with veterans. That's what they do day in and day out. They know their clients. They know veterans, and some of them are veterans. So again, looking forward to being able to roll out those funds to make sure that the agencies receive the funds, and then from there, at the end of the day, they'll be able to provide services, help and support to our veterans.
Quickly then, Minister, since I have a minute. Unfortunately, significant contributions of Indigenous veterans have not always been recognized as they should, and I've heard about that in the last little while as well. And I know there is a commemorative partnership program that invested in funding for projects in Indigenous communities, and maybe you can let us know what you're doing to ensure the sacrifices of these brave women and men get the due recognition that they deserve.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I think, again, our department, our government is certainly committed to supporting and recognizing the contributions that Indigenous veterans have made to this country. And when it comes to commemoration, we certainly want to make sure that we do our part in including them in many of the and all of the commemoration events that are going on. That is why that at Veterans Affairs Canada, we have a designated team right now, or a dedicated team, I should say, of Indigenous employees that are working on this team, and we are going out into communities and actually doing outreach with Indigenous communities across the country. We also want to make sure that Indigenous veterans are aware of the services and support that they are entitled to, and we have teams that go out in different parts of the country, again, making sure that they can meet with Indigenous veterans, let it be in the northern part of the country, because sometimes it's a bit more isolated. But again, we want to make sure that we do all that we can to recognize, to support their contributions that they've made.
Thank you very much. Eh bien, c'est là que se termine la première heure de...
We've come to the end of the first hour of our meeting. I would like to thank the witnesses and members of the committee. We had the following people appearing before the committee: Madame Jeanette Petit-Taylor, Minister of Veteran Affairs, Associate Minister of National Defense, Sarah Lawrence, Video Conference Stephen Harris, Service Delivery Sector. We shall suspend for a few minutes. We have witnesses who have to test their sound connection, so we'll resume after.
This meeting back to order. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, November 28, 2023, the committee is resuming its study of subject matter of Supplementary Estimate B 2023-2024. Et conformément à notre motion de routine, les tests de connexion.
In accordance with our routine motion, connection tests have been done. Let's extend a cordial welcome to our guest for the second hour.
We still have Mrs. Sarah Lenz, Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Services with us. Et Monsieur Pierre Tessier,
Mr. Pierre Tessier,
Policy Planning and Performance Branch. Mr. Stephen Harris, still there as Assistant Deputy Minister, Service Delivery Branch by video conference. And welcome Mrs. Amy Meunier, Assistant Deputy Minister, Commemoration and Public Affairs Branch by video conference. I don't know if Mr. Harris or Mr. Tessier, if you have an opening statement, I can give you 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, we don't have any opening statement.
Okay, great, perfect. So let's start the first round of questions. And I invite MP Blake Richards for 6 minutes, please.
Sure. I'm going to share some time with Mr. Dowdall, but I've got one or two quick questions. First, Ms. Meunier, with regards to the National Monument to the mission in Afghanistan, was the Prime Minister's office involved in the decision to change the awarding of the contract, or were they involved in the discussions around that changing of that decision?
They were part of members of the Prime Minister's office, along with the Privy Council's office, were part of general discussion about the topic, along with PCH, or Canadian Heritage officials, as well as Veterans Affairs Canada officials.
So there was discussion that took place on that in a number of meetings and a number of emails and stuff. It looks like over about a year and a half. Who made the ultimately who made the decision to when it came right down to it, who made that decision to make that change?
The Minister of Veterans Affairs.
So the minister was the one that signed off on the decision, and there was no involvement of the Prime Minister's office in the making of that decision?
I'm not aware of any involvement.
Aware of any involvement. So you're not saying there wasn't, but you're not aware of it.
I've not been in any meeting where I saw any odd involvement whatsoever.
But the Prime Minister's office was involved in meetings around that decision, correct?
That's correct. Like any other file of consequence or importance such as this, we would update both the Privy Council and the Prime Minister's office.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn my time to Mr. Dowdall.
Okay, thank you, Blake, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. I was glad to see the minister here, and I was actually quite happy that our two concerns were, that for the veterans that we listen to them was number one. And that's probably the number one call I get, is that they don't think that they're listened to, quite frankly, when they call me or email me. They don't think they're listened to. And the other thing is access to services. And that's the other thing, probably the other item that I get most of my calls about is the lack of, I guess, the access is difficult to navigate. It's certainly not simple for people that aren't computer literate or good at paperwork, so frustrated with that. But I also heard this morning that the VAC website and system crashed and was unusable. And basically that means that veterans were unable to upload forms, contact their case managers, or contact VAC online. And it also means that caseworkers from PCVRS and medical service providers could not upload forms or send referrals to their VAC counterparts to process veterans' claims for support. And this has happened before. I believe probably less than 2 weeks ago. The site was down, I think, for a couple of days as well, and we've heard that sometimes that's the case. So I'm just wondering, what are we doing to improve that so that that doesn't happen to veterans when they're trying to log in?
Perhaps I can take that question. We regularly do updates to systems. Generally, we schedule those outside of normal working hours. The website or the MyVac account that you're referring to, Mr. Chair, is available 24/7, essentially, other than scheduled outages. There are occasional technical issues that require updates. Sometimes those come to us unannounced, either as a result of a system problem that may affect multiple systems. Veterans can continue to call the National Client Contact Center if MyVac account isn't working to get access to supports and services. But sometimes there can be delays when a system's down for a couple of hours during a working day. That's certainly unfortunate, but part of the issue of maintaining multiple systems, making sure they're updated and they're functioning correctly, they're secure and protected as well. So there are a couple of incidents that happen on that. I'm not aware of anything where 2 days of lack of access to service has been in place, but we do work to make sure that it's available as often and as ultimately as frequently as possible to help support veterans who might want to access it at whatever time of day is convenient for them.
Okay, and we also heard from the Davidson Institute that it takes them over 100 hours of work just to process the claims for one veteran to enter the program, which is really tailor-made to help veterans with trauma. So we're just, once again, I'm just wondering the system. We hear it constantly, and it seems to be the same. It's the same really issues that are brought up over and over again, and I'm just wondering how long it takes before we can simplify the systems so that maybe we won't have the backlogs that we're seeing now, but also that we'll actually provide a better service to those that have served us.
So let me jump here in here, Mr. Chair. We are concurrent as we hire people to work on the backlog. We have concurrently invested in our IT infrastructure as well. When we launched our Pension for Life programs, we introduced the newer, more modern GC case management system, and we continue to move all our programs over to that system. And as getting on that newer infrastructure too will give us the agility and ability to do more with technology to simplify and to help.
At a time, I hate to be rude, but just one quick more comment I have to make. I know that we do these studies regularly. Sometimes we're doing the study again. There's been a lot of studies that are done every few years, the transitioning. What do you do when you get that study with the recommendations? Where does it go, and do you follow up to see what recommendations are followed upon to make the service better?
I think I can take that as it relates to transition, but frankly, any of the recommendations that come from the committee itself. Obviously, the first thing we do is do a formal government response, take the recommendations that are issued in any report that is coming from ACFA or frankly any of the other parliamentary committees. We look at that in detail as to where we can make improvements. Sometimes that's individual as a department, sometimes that's collaborative in the case of working with our Canadian Armed Forces colleagues, RCMP, or others. We respond to the report as to whether we accept the recommendation and work towards it, and we make improvements, frankly, based on the excellent recommendations that come in from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Dodell. And now let's go to Mr. Miao for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the officials for being here today. I would like to talk more about the backlog. Between 2015 and 2016, and 2022 and 2023, Veteran Affairs Canada experienced a 61% increase in the number of applications received for disability benefits. Is the number of applications stabilizing at this time?
Apologies for the delay while I unmute. The number of applications varies. We saw some variability during the COVID period. Every year it has seemed to go up since about 2015-16, increasing applications in for a variety of programs, but mostly the disability benefits program. As I said, there was some variability during the COVID period. It is stabilizing at this point at a higher level and a consistently higher level.
Thank you. And since 2020, FACT has also reduced the backlog by 75%. And in the supplementary estimates, there is an amount of $3.6 million to deliver service excellence to veterans by reducing backlogs and improving service standards. Can you explain in more details how this amount will help and what exactly it will be used for?
Thank you again for the question. This specific amount relates to some of the service standard wait times that exist at our Bureau for Pension Advocates in particular, reducing the amount of time that it might take for a lawyer who works in the Bureau for Pension Advocates to be able to assist a veteran who may be going through an appeals process. That's primarily it. There's also some funding that is there for what I would discuss or describe as program integrity. This allows for additional staff to be in place to help ensure that we have enough capacity to meet the demand for veterans who may be coming in through various programs. We've seen enormous growth. The member mentioned the growth in applications. We've seen enormous growth in applications and participation in other programs, such as the rehabilitation program over the course of the last number of years. That increase requires some additional staff to be able to support to ensure the program functions effectively, that it's supporting veterans well, that we're able to have the capacity needed to be able to respond and maintain the support that veterans require as well. So that's some of the other areas that funding is going into.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And the government also announced in last February a funding of $139.6 million over 2 years to extend temporary employees, which will last until March of 2024. To continue to reduce the processing time for disability benefits. Do you still expect to have significantly reduced processing time by March?
Yes, we've been reducing the turnaround times for disability benefits applications over the course of the last number of years. As a result of the additional funding we've received, the additional human resources capacity that we've had on hand, to be able to address files beyond our service standard of 16 weeks, what's commonly referred to the backlog. As noted by the member, it's been reduced by about 75%. In real terms, however, that means benefits being provided for veterans, treatment access for veterans, and it actually means reduced wait times, significantly reduced wait times. Even just a couple of years ago, we had turnaround times or wait times for applications in the weeks of 40 weeks. And the average times as of this current fiscal year, the first couple of quarters for this current fiscal year, are down into the early 20s. We still have work to do to make sure that we're meeting our 16-week service standard. But I can add for the committee, the first couple of months of this year, our service standard or our ability to meet our service standard is up closer to 70%, which is near to the 80% service standard that we've set. Again, there is additional work that needs to be done, and as we go through some of the files that have been in the queue for some time, those decisions have impacts on the turnaround times. The longer it's been waiting, when the decision is made, the effect is on the turnaround times. But veterans are getting decisions for the disability applications much, much more quickly than they were even just a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And to you again through the chair, what variables determines the amount of needed to reduce and eventually eliminate the processing delays?
I would say there's three things. The one that we can't control is the number of applications that come forward to us. The department has made and put exceptional effort into making sure that we're publicizing the benefits, services, and programs that we have available. And what that means is that more veterans may come forward to apply. That's a good story, but it also challenges us from our resource point of view. And so we can't control the amount of intake that comes in. We want to make sure that we're responding to any veteran who comes forward with that need. The second variable would be, our ability from an automatic point of view to reduce the challenge of the application process, to make it easier for veterans, to make it easier for service providers, health professionals, and others to submit documentation that we might need. And lastly is the actual capacity that we have in the department from a human resources point of view to be able to process these things. And we've had, an ability to improve or increase our amount of staff to do that over the last number of years. And that's been shown up in the reduction to the backlog.
Great, thanks, Mr. Harris. I think my time is almost up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miao. And maintenant, j'aimerais inviter Monsieur Luc Desilets.
Now, Mr. Luc Desilets, you have the floor for the next 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Harris, who prepared that survey regarding the monument? I'm coming back to the monument. I cannot answer that question. I wasn't involved on that file. You were not at all involved on that monument file? No. I'm dealing with service delivery, but that was not part of my responsibilities. To your knowledge, at VAC, had results of such a survey been used before to take decisions? Surveys are used. We have a survey for veterans, clients that we do every 2 years to learn more about their experiences when it comes to access to our programs. We try to find out their level of satisfaction, but it's still a survey. We use the results to learn more about how we need to improve or change our programs or meet the needs of veterans. So you are talking about scientific surveys. Yes. We also use consultations with veterans. We use an application, Let's Talk Veterans in English. It's a type of consultation, and we ask them many questions. Recently, we had a consultation with them about their experiences with the application process for service delivery. So we asked them questions like, what was your experience? Do you have any advice for us to improve the process? I've seen some of those surveys which are well designed, but we are not talking about the same survey here when we talk about the monument. I know that you are very sensitive to the cause of veterans. In the case of the monument, if veterans had been clearly told, you will be choosing the monument, or we will give the choice of the monument to a jury, what do you think the veterans would have said? Unfortunately, Chair, I cannot answer such questions. It's not something I was involved with at all. Mr. Harris, you must have heard about it. You have meetings amongst you assistant deputy ministers. You are aware that a jury was set up. It's the results of the jury process that had to be approved by the two ministers. So I'm sure you are aware of all that. I hear about the progress of the file because I'm interested in us having a good department for our veterans. But unfortunately, I am working on a very big file myself. So I need to focus on my own files. On something else, I've been on the committee for 4 years now, and I'll pick up on where my colleague left off. We are talking about backlogs all the time. Is it normal for us to base a system on backlogs? That's the incapacity to respond to demands or requests. I did not create the system. I am interested in and committed to making sure that veterans could receive responses as fast as possible. There are things that we can do to improve the system, to increase capacity and meet the service request. But you understand my question. I understand that you may not want to answer, but in the area of health, is there a way of working that way? We try to lose the most people. We try to reduce the number of deaths, for example. We prepare a plan and over which files have to be resolved over a number of days. Is it normal for us to work this way? we are not far from achieving our targets with service standards. As I said before, we have dealt with about 70% of the requests in less than 5 weeks. Of course, there are things that we can do, and there are things that we are doing to make sure that we respond within a reasonable time frame. Over the past 6 months, how far have you gone with the time limits or deadlines that were so different between Francophones and Anglophones and men and women? So far, the deadlines for requests in French are processed more rapidly than the ones in English. So there's an advantage for the French files. A difference of 0.5 per week. For men and women, there's a 3-week difference. The deadline for women is 3 weeks longer. Sorry? When are we going to see those results? Because what you are saying is that it's historic. They will soon be published. There's always a lag from the time it ends and the time it's published, but it's going to be published on our website soon. It's the same thing you're saying for women. For women, the variation is 3 weeks during this fiscal year. Last year, the difference was 1 week because the number of requests from female veterans is lower, 10 to 17% of our applications. So this would lead to a variation year after year. But we've reduced the variation from about 10 to 12 weeks, and it's now only 1 week. Sometimes it's 3 weeks. It was the same experience. There was a time when the experience for female veterans was faster than for male veterans. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Mr. Desile.
Rachel Bliney for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to the folks that are left over to chat with us a little bit more about Veterans Affairs. I will allow you to decide who the best person is to answer, but if you don't answer soon, I'll have to bother Mr. Harris, I think. So that's just a little heads up. So one of the concerns that we've heard, especially during our study on women veterans, is that there's a concern about identifying any preventable causes of sex-specific illnesses and injuries in the CAF. So what women are calling for is for VAC to communicate to CAF the lessons learned from the first few decades of service by women in operational roles and environments. And I'm just wondering if the department has any plans to work together with CAF to prevent unnecessary sex-specific injuries and illnesses among military women, and if so, could you elaborate on how that might happen? And if not, can you explain why? Going
Sure,
once.
Oh,
Mr. Harris, it's good to see you.
It's nice to see you, even though I feel like a leftover. The answer to the question is we do actually what you've indicated already in terms of communicating back and forth and working with our Canadian Armed Forces colleagues on anything that we see as a trend line. This happens for women or men veterans. If we see changes into the kinds of applications that we're getting, if we see specific kinds of things changing, we do communicate. We have a health professionals group in my own organization that works very closely with the Canadian Armed Forces Health Services Group as well to identify.
Well, Mr. Harris, thank you. You answered my question. So the next question that I have is, could you provide the committee with the trends that you're seeing specifically around women and sex-specific injuries and illnesses, and what you've identified as a trend as you just spoke about?
Sure. And so what I was talking about from a high-level perspective is the groups work together to share any information. And so if we see trends that are different between men and women veterans.
That is excellent. So you're going to table that with the committee?
I can share information back with you. Yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So we know that women veterans are calling for reproductive health research that follows them from military to veteran status, while also capturing the possible health impacts that their service had on their offspring. Of course, I hope everybody in this room has heard the testimony from the women veterans and how important this is. So I'm just wondering what the department is doing to ensure that women's reproductive health is considered in the health coverage and services provided by VAC. And I just want to remind everyone here the question that I did ask the ministers. One of the challenges, of course, is often women are not coming forward, or when they do come forward, the assessment isn't done properly around their health care. And, you know, for example, we heard that some women were getting breast reductions to wear their kit. So when these things happen, I just want to know, is that actually being followed up? And what is VAC doing to address these specific reproductive health issues that have been a consequence of their service, and how is that communication happening between CAF and VAC to address it? I'm assuming it's Mr. Harris again.
I might start, and I might ask Mr. Tessier to talk a little bit about research from that point of view. You know, we are consistently looking at the testimony that appears here. We look forward to the recommendations and the report that comes back from the committee on this very extensive research into women's health. With respect to whether it's reproductive health or women's health overall, you know, we continue to examine existing research, new research that's done within the community, within the Five Eyes community as well, and others.
Okay, can I just pause you there?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, interpreters. I'm trying to do this as well as I possibly can. So I guess my question, just for clarification, is you're talking about reviewing other research done with our partners. Could you reference any research or commitment to research that Canada has around these particular concerns?
And in this case, I might ask Mr. Tessier to respond to the kind of research that VAC undertakes and is able to do.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. As we work very closely with our CAF health professional colleagues, we do look at research that's underway in the CAF, research that's underway within VAC, some of the future VAC projects around specifically this area that I have here today, examining barriers to service for LGBT purge survivors, investigating women veteran reproductive challenges, specifically looking at that issue and further researching, and scoping new intimate partner violence among veterans. So continuing that research, working very closely with our CAF colleagues to exchange the research so we don't duplicate research and build off what we have.
So we've heard through testimony in the women's study that one of the challenges is that there's just not enough Canada-focused research on both sides. So I guess the follow-up question to this is just, what is the commitment to invest in this research, and how are you collaborating, or how is the department collaborating with CAF to make sure that the research is done on both sides so that we can see that collaboration between the service of and then the response after service?
Definitely. Thank you for the chair. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. What we've done in the 18 months that I've joined Veterans Affairs is we've formed actually a research and policy ADM steering committee and DG steering committee to review the research that is happening currently, research that's being planned, so we can build off of that. And the research that I've mentioned is definitely in the looking to be in the pending and approval stages. So definitely committed to this research, but also looking at looking forward to the study on women veterans that's occurring today as well, and taking some of those recommendations into our research as we have it today.
Thank you very much, and For the next round, we're going to have 4 interventions, and I invite Mrs. Kathy Morgenthau for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. So my first question here is around the role of our minister, who is also the Associate Minister of National Defense. And I see that she has a significant number of people working with her. Are you all just on the back side of things? Who is it that it works alongside her in this role as Associate Minister of National Defense? Mr. Harris, do you know?
That's correct. We just work with her in supporting her role from a Veterans Affairs point of view. That said, we do a lot of work with our Canadian Armed Forces colleagues at the ADM level and throughout many working groups as well. And so we're in close contact with it. Her role as Associate Minister for National Defense is focused mainly on personnel.
So, okay, so I just want to know then, the Deputy Minister doesn't have a specific role in relation to working with her on things that are of concern. We're talking about a seamless transition here. I think that's why this position was created, which appears great. But I'm asking this question, is there anyone designated, the way we have a Deputy Minister for Veterans Affairs Canada, who is designated to her services in regard to being the Associate Minister of National Defense?
No, and I think that actually speaks to the seamless nature of it. They work. The deputy minister works with his partner.
Thank you.
At DND.
This is why I'm asking this question. We had a young woman veteran testify last week, Stephanie Hayward, and I hope that the minister has followed up with her. My understanding from her testimony, which I hope that you would all read, because her concerns are with VAC, and yet she faced an atrocious gang rape within Canadian Armed Forces, where when she reported it and whatnot, she ended up in isolation until she was removed. And it was when she finally tried to get assistance through VAC that the Bureau of Pension Advocates discovered that there were files that belonged with her medical files that were stored elsewhere. And if they had not looked and found them, she would not have known that they existed. So I want to know if our Associate Minister of National Defense, who is responsible for Veterans Affairs, has looked into this to know where those files were hidden, if there's more, and whether or not those files will be released to be with the rest of the files in relation to those particular veterans. Are you aware of any work then, being in association with her on pretty well everything she does, that she's done any research into what happened here with the Canadian Armed Forces in those files?
Mr. Chair, I'm not able to speak on behalf of the minister herself. What I can say is we continue to work to ensure that transition for every Canadian Armed Forces member is.
I would like to know specifically about those files. So if it's possible to have it on the record, and if we could ask that those questions be provided to the minister and to the deputy minister to respond to this committee in that regard. We have a real serious issue here around the treatment of women, specifically with military sexual trauma. This one was very hard for me to stomach, and especially the fact that her injuries have impacted her ability to have children, and VAC has not responded. So this is something that I think we need to work significantly on. We talked a lot about medical files over the last 8 years and how they aren't accessible to our veterans. I'm understanding that more and more. My understanding is that VAC doesn't have them, and the veterans are considered third party, and in Canada there's no access. Has there been any movement on this issue that was part of recommendations that medical files get digitized and become the property available to veterans at any time that they may want to have them?
So, Mr. Chair, the medical file of a particular Canadian Armed Forces serving member or released member is not a property of Veterans Affairs. What we do ask for are relevant sections of a veteran's medical file to be provided to us to be able to adjudicate in cases where claims, be they disability or otherwise, are being made.
I understand that you do ask for what you need, but you don't always see everything to know if there's something there that you should have that you aren't aware that you should have. So my question is, why is it that you don't have access to them and veterans don't have access to them?
Veterans can get access to their medical files, not through Veterans Affairs Canada. They can make the request to be able to access their medical file. We would not have a veteran's entire medical. We're not considered to have a need to have an entire veteran's medical file from
Chair.
privacy point of view and others.
30 seconds. Okay, quick question. The $2 million for research projects, they come from a transfer from the Department of National Defense, $1.65 million. I would like to know, is that coming from their research funding or from a different source? And also a reallocation of internal resources. Where did the $350,000 come from that was added to that for research projects?
Thank you for the chair, Mr. Question. Thank you for the question, Mr. Yes, I'll answer the question. The funding that comes from CAF D&D comes from their research area. That's my understanding.
And so the $350K that you see coming internally within the department is really just a change in how public PSPC, Procurement Canada, advised us that we should be moving the money from a contract base to a traditional grants and contribution to fund the research. So it was just an internal transfer across the vote to appropriately fund the research. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And now let's go to Mr. Sean Casey for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to start with Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris, during Ms. Wagenthal's questions, it seemed as though there were a few occasions where you were trying to provide a more complete answer and were prevented from doing so, specifically on the subject of a seamless transition between D&D and VAC. If there was any information that you wanted to share with the committee that you weren't able to, this is your chance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think I would just try and explain the purpose for which Veterans Affairs obtains medical files in looking at a veteran's application for any number of programs, most specifically disability benefits. We do access information from the Canadian Armed Forces, the Minister, the Department of National Defense in support of those applications when we have to determine service relationship for an injury or an illness that's been suffered by a Canadian Armed Forces member or a transitioning or veteran. We only ask for the information relevant to the disability or illness or injury that they're looking for so that we don't actually access inappropriately an entire file of information of medical history or otherwise that we don't actually need to render a decision for a particular benefit. We only access that part. The files remain the property of Department of National Defense and ultimately for the individual veterans, Canadian Armed Forces members. We do have still serving Canadian Armed Forces members who make applications. And so that information, again, comes when they make the application. And in the need of or the intent of providing seamless transition, our interest and our obligation is to try and make sure that all of the benefits that need to be in place to help support somebody going through a transitionary process are in place before they transition. We work very diligently with the Canadian Armed Forces to do so.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to bring the conversation back to the estimates. I'm going to take a page out of Ms. Blaney's book. Whoever feels that they have the information with which to answer, feel free to pipe up. Mr. Tolmie talked about the fact that there are so many people with hearing loss claims that find themselves in front of the Veterans Review and Appeal Board and their appeals are upheld. In the estimates that were voted on the other night, there was $15 million dedicated to the modernization of IT infrastructure to make advancements in process automation for the most common medical conditions. I understand tinnitus and hearing loss are two of them. If the Conservatives had got their way and successfully blocked this investment, what would the impact be on the processing of these type of claims?
Perhaps I can offer some insight on the actual processing. I'm not sure I can speak exactly to the impact in the way in which the question is framed, but earlier questioning and information shared related to how often something is approved or not approved, how difficult it is, or why does the Veterans Review and Appeal Board approve something. With respect to tinnitus, it's actually approved 93% of the time on first application. Hearing loss is 82%. Our overall first application approval rate is 90%. And so the question comes, why does the Veterans Review and Appeals Board, for example, approve a number of hearing loss or tinnitus claims when the appeals come to them. In many cases, they're using new information. In other words, the veteran is submitting new information as part of their application on the appeal. And so the Veterans Review and Appeal Board has information at that point in time that was not available to the Veterans Affairs decision maker at that point. And that is particularly true because in a decision letter that would say that a particular application is not going to be approved, we point out where the lack of evidence is. And so when a veteran comes back through the appeals process, they have very specific information as to the kinds of things that they need to show as evidence to be able to get a positive decision. And that's likely why the approval rate from a Veterans Review and Appeals Board decision is much higher on that than what might have been presented as an application that didn't have all of that evidence at that time.
There was one measure contained in the estimates that the Conservatives didn't get the chance to vote against, and that was additional funding for $800,000 for the Veterans Emergency Fund as a result of an internal reallocation. Why is that important?
We have a number of veterans who obviously come forward. An emergency fund was set up through a new program about 5 years ago. To be able to respond to veterans in crisis or emergency who need short-term assistance on any number of things. Could be something related to immediate housing, could be related to medical expenses and/or others. The program is slightly oversubscribed. In other words, the allocation for the department is $1 million annually. However, our experience has been that we require somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 or $2 million on an annual basis to help support individuals. That was a little bit higher in cases of COVID and others. And so we've reallocated money to be able to ensure that there's enough funds in the Veterans Emergency Fund to carry through the entire of the fiscal year and be able to support veterans throughout the fiscal year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kessy. And now two quick interventions, and I invite Monsieur Desilets pour 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Desilets, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I have a question for you, Mr. Kessy. During the study on women, we heard a lot that there wasn't sufficient research, enough grants, and so on. And there's something else that came up. I would like you to tell us what you think about coordination between research. What do you think?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The coordination of research, I would say there's two aspects to it. Overall, the first one is not all research is commissioned by Department of National Defense, CAF, and Veterans Affairs. Lots of it is commissioned through academia, research, and interest, and also priority within the civilian population. I would say the second portion is where and how departments, not just CAF and Veterans Affairs, but also Health Canada, look at research and capitalize on that research, but also coordinate on findings of that research and ensure there's no duplication as we plan research. So to me, that is the premise of how we should look at research into the future, but also using it to take evidence-based policy decisions.
Merci. Vous avez fait allusion à une étude sur l'impact.
Thank you. I referred to a study on the impact of military life on reproduction. It's very interesting. Is that something that exists on the impact of that on pregnancy or after pregnancy, the first days or years of life? Because people refer to it, because some people thought that there could be developmental problems. Could you answer quickly, because I don't have enough time?
I don't have that at my fingertips, but if we do have it, I'd be happy to provide to the committee.
Merci. Mon autre question s'adresserait à...
Thank you. Any one of our guests can answer my next question. Has anyone heard about women who went through breast reduction because of the use of inappropriate equipment in the armed forces?
Je dois comprendre que... Non.
No, I'm not aware of any such cases in particular. Generally speaking, we know that equipment can have different consequences on veterans. equipment could cause different diseases for veterans as well. It's not like the adjustments that were made by the veterans themselves, but the impact of their service could be different. It could lead to different requests from veterans. Thank you, Mr. Desalegn.
Meeting, and I'm pleased to invite Ms. Rachel Blaney for 2 minutes and a half, please.
Thank you, Chair. I always enjoy getting the last word in, so I appreciate that. I'm going to go through the chair to Mr. Harris, and if there's somebody else that should answer the two questions that I'm going to start with, please let me know, and I would appreciate that. So the first question, I believe I got this correct, that the minister said that since 2015, $11 billion has been invested. Increased investment has happened for the department. So I'm just wondering if the math has been done around that investment versus the amount that has been returned at the end of every fiscal year. And if that has been done, if we could get that math shared with us. And then the second question that I have is around the survivor's pension. You know, I think everybody knows that the survivor's pension is of a significant concern to me. We know that a lot of senior women are living in poverty because they don't have any benefits from their spouse because they married after 60. We know that in 2019, 4 years ago now, the announcement was made that $150 million would be put towards a survivor's pension. And every time that I've asked so far, what I've heard is that there's still a process of looking at how that money will be disseminated. So my question is, could the department table with this committee how much money has gone out actually to survivors since 2019 and how many survivors has it supported? Mr. Harris?
Apologies for the question on the financials. I would ask Ms. Lance to just respond.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yes, so we do have detailed analysis of all the surpluses or the lapses against our full budgetary authorities each year, and I believe I just signed off on a response to you with the detailed. So, we analyze that every year and why, and the most recent years we had a little bit more surplus than others due to the volatility and in the predicting our forecasted expenditures, but we've come down below the 5% again, which is our annual target. And just a reminder that any of those lapsed funds that are part of the quasi-statutory, we do not lose those funds. They go back into the bank account for when a veteran comes forward. We're essentially trying to forecast what is needed within a fiscal year, but if that funding is not used up in that fiscal year, it is available when the veteran may come forward in a future year.
And then the marriage after 60, I didn't get a response on that. And I just asked if that could be tabled with the committee. So if I could get confirmation that that would be tabled, I would be happy with that response. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And nous avions avec nous 4 sous-ministres.
We have 4 Assistant Deputy Ministers who joined us for the second hour. On behalf of members of the committee and myself, I would like to thank you. First of all, Mr. Stephen Harris, Assistant Deputy Minister, Service Delivery Branch, appearing by video conference. Ms. Amy Meunier, Assistant Deputy Minister, Commemoration and Public Affairs Branch, appearing by video conference. Ms. Sarah Lance, Assistant Deputy Minister, CFO, and Corporate Services. And to conclude, Mr. Pierre Tessier, Assistant Deputy Minister, Service Delivery Branch. Once again, thank you for your participation. I don't know if you noticed that this afternoon, our clerk was Ms. Karine Grandjean, who accompanied us perfectly. Thank you. Our interpreters were also present here with us. I also want to thank the technicians
Plan personally is to come back next year, and so I don't know, Mr. Richards.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say, well, we might try to ruin those plans and see if we can call an election. No, that wasn't actually what. That wasn't actually. We tried that 135 times last week. So, but no, actually, what I wanted to do was ask you about Thursday. What was the plans for Thursday's committee business?
Well, I don't have any other instructions, but personally, I spoke to the clerk and I said, well, we have a lot of motions. Maybe that we should having a subcommittee and discussing all of that and start a new session in January.
Okay, understood. And what about the drafting instructions for the women's study? Are we planning on doing that, or?
Yeah, for the women's study, so the analyst told me that he already started the report, but he said he's going to present I don't know, something to, he's going to present something to us. So he said that it will be too difficult to ask you guys to bring your recommendations. It's going to be a lot of work because it's he can say a few words.
You should receive a draft early next year. I've been writing the draft. I'm not waiting for the end of the study, so you should be receiving something quite early in the new year, and then I would expect you to react to that with potential recommendations to add to that. But I think I'm covering most of the issues that have been brought that have been of interest to the committee. But of course, I will have forgotten a few.
Monsieur Desilets.
Mr. Desilets.
You don't have the last word. Mr. Desilets. Allez-y, Monsieur Desilets.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, Chair. If it's possible, during the next meeting, I understand we'll be looking at motions. I understand there are many others that we've not yet looked into. Conservative motions. We could send many motions. We'll ask the clerk to send them by date of tabling, because you are right, there are many motions, Ms. Blaney. It's because some of them are just notices of motion. When it's a notice of motion, at that time we'll discuss them in committee. Ms. Blaney.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to see if the analyst would like us to send any recommendations that we may have to help him while he's writing.
Well, the issue here is the recommendations that you will send me, I've probably already considered them, maybe not them all. The issue is that I don't want to during the first draft, I do not want to receive contradictory recommendations, because it makes it very difficult to argue prior to the recommendations why it is there. If I receive A and non-A, I cannot argue for both at the same time in the same draft. So I would encourage you to trust that I've been fair and wide on the issues, and then you will have the opportunity to react to the draft when it's.
Well, I could just send recommendations and everybody could agree not to.
You can send
just
them
me
to me.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I'm asking you for unanimous consent.
I reserve the right to take that on the next study then.
Okay, so Ms. Blaney, you have the last word. So it's been so lovely to work with you guys, and thank you for everything. And I wish to all of you, your staff and family, happy holidays. Meeting adjourned.